We are joined now by longtime Sun Sentinel columnist Dave Hyde, who's covered the Miami Dolphins for decades. You've seen all the dark times. You've been through many head coaches. I think in one of your articles last week, you referred to this as the most damaging season in Dolphins history. I think I'm getting that right. That said, how important was it that this happened today and Mike McDaniel was fired and that they are moving on?
Yeah, I just think, they have so many big decisions here: general manager, quarterback, salary cap hell. Look at the division with Drake May in New England and Josh Allen and Buffalo going to be there for years. They needed a good football decision. And really what they need is a clean slate and start all over and try to get it right this time. So I understand what Steve Ross is doing.
Why do you think it was staggered? Because there was a lot of heat. I think you were one of the guys who mentioned on Monday it was kind of strange that we heard nothing from Stephen Ross himself and that Mike McDaniel was up there answering questions as to whether or not he was going to be involved in the GM search. Why was this staggered? Was this a case of them seeing who was available, namely John Harbaugh, and that things had changed a little bit in the last couple of days, or was this inevitable all along?
Yeah, I think in retrospect that I get what they did. Their business as usual with Mike doing the day after the season press conference and being asked about his role and him, speaking honestly about what he thought his role was, and it was his role and his role inside the team until it changed. And the question becomes, what changed it? What did Steve Ross come to a realization that we need to move on? Did John Harbaugh becoming available? Was that the catalyst to, starting all over for the Dolphins? We'll find out coming up.
What's your gut? I don't know if that's fair to ask me, but what's your gut? Do you think that he was dead man walking already, so to speak, on Monday? Or do you think things have changed over the past couple of days where this decision was ultimately made?
I think talking to people inside the organization that they thought Steve Ross wanted to keep him heading into the final game of the year. Now, whether Steve realized that he wasn't going to be able to do that, or I think John Harbaugh's availability changed things. There's a name that they could hire to bring trust back to the organization.
What do you think the chances are that the Dolphins can haul in Harbaugh here? I know a lot of teams have been reaching out to him. Obviously, he's got a big decision to make here.
Yeah, I think the odds have gone up to a pretty good percentage here. You start when the Dolphins spent weeks compiling a list of general managers candidates they wanted, and they announced it Monday morning, and then late Monday, about the time Harbaugh was being fired, they announced that a final candidate who was the LA Chargers assistant general manager. He worked with John's brother Jim, and previous to that, he worked a long time in the Ravens organization with John. So here was the Dolphins sending up a flare saying, you come, we're interested in you, and we're interviewing a guy who I'm sure they did a little homework and said that Harbaugh loves him. So when they did that, I thought, okay, maybe there's a chance for Harbaugh. And then with the firing of Mike, it makes you think, okay, there's something going on here beyond just, cleaning the slate of and starting all over. So I think my gut, as you asked, my gut says I think they're on the inside track to Harbaugh. And the question is, can they close the deal?
All right. And it's always a gamble. It's not a guarantee they're going to close the deal. The last two head coach hirings have been these really highly praised assistants, Flores and McDaniel, of course. Do you think this time, either way, whether it's Harbaugh or not, that it needs to be a more experienced head coach, someone who could come in and not start from scratch?
I think there's a dozen ways up the mountain, and you get a great first-time assistant. Look at Chicago with Ben Johnson, the LA Rams with Sean McVay. You can make that work. Andy Reid leaves Philadelphia because he evidently didn't win enough, and he goes to Kansas City, and they've been in Super Bowls forever. So I think there's a lot of ways that it comes down to that one person. If you're asking me, I get why John Harbaugh would be what this franchise needs. So bring trust, bring credibility, a football voice. Steve Ross hasn't been able to solve the organization. Right now, you just take the keys, hand them to Harbaugh, and say, you take over.
Last one. No one really wants to look back here. It's too painful. But what went wrong ultimately with Mike McDaniel?
Well, I think everybody was rooting for Mike, wasn't it? With the quirky side to him, the unfootball coach as the football coach, with a really creative offensive mind. But ultimately, on some level, it still comes down to winning. He's 35-35. He invested, to the good when he started. He was one of his main jobs was to bring out who Tua was, Tua Tagovailoa as a quarterback. He did that, but then he overinvested him. He pounded the table to get him the big contract that now is an albatross to the franchise. And I thought, ultimately, I thought he was learning on the job how to handle players, how to deal with, star players like Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle when they're constantly late to meetings last year. But ultimately, it's winning and losing, and he didn't win enough.
You led me to one more there. What does this mean ultimately for Tua Tagovailoa? I mean, this is big news as far as his future is concerned. McDaniel is the one who figured out how to make him successful in 2023. Struggled ever since then, of course, the health issues and everything. This leaves a lot of question marks for his career, doesn't it?
Yeah, you could look at it with two ways. One is, you talked about getting a fresh start with the new coach. Well, there's going to be a new coach here. So you could argue maybe he gets his fresh start here. I would think probably not. I would think he, probably moves on somewhere else and gets that fresh start. And, no reason not to wish him the best. Him and Mike, the best. It just didn't work out here.
One of these years, I'm going to be talking to you about some playoff success here. I hope that'll happen soon. Enough doom and gloom.
I'm going to be eating my vegetables and drinking my healthy, taking my healthy vitamins so I can live long enough to see the Dolphins do something good.
Oh, you're looking good already, Dave Hyde. Thank you so much.
Thanks, John.